I'm going to do this. I'm doing it on my laptop and in my office, so this will be no great production value. But I meant to record this for you over the break, and I just totally lost it. So the model that you created was amazing. Quickly getting a feel for subdivision surface and making cuts and extrusions and all those things, which I think will serve you well, like the stuff that you might want to do. And certainly, like, that's the preferred way. I wanted to show an alternate route that's a little more down and dirty, but I think I experimented with this approach for my students in the model building class, and it was a good way to get them up to speed. And then they started using the things that you were doing, the cutting and extruding, the more like per point edge polygon manipulation stuff. So anyway, so this other method is it's kind of like Minecraft on steroids. So the whole idea that we could build a surface out of voxels. Voxels are three-dimensional pixels. So it sounds technical, but you'll see it's pretty easy here in a second. So I'm going to try to recreate your coffee mug very quickly here. So, and I'm using version 25 here. I'll just create a cylinder and stretch this out. And I'm doing this on my laptop, so I don't have like a mouse. I'm just using the trackpad, so it'll be a little cumbersome here. But so here's this cylinder, and I'm going to use this as the basis of this voxelized object. So what the hell does that mean, or how do you do that in Cinema 4D? So again, in Minecraft, what it does is it creates these cubes. And so these cubes are like pixels, but they're just three-dimensional pixels. There's a lot of technical reasons why it's pretty efficient and can build objects the way they do. But you don't need to worry about that other than just, I want to use these. So here on the little tool menu, this one that looks kind of like a little scene from Minecraft, right? Or Qbert, if you're old enough to remember that video game. So there's two items that you need to use for this. There's the builder, and then there's the mesher. So the first one is the builder, which actually generates this stuff. So I'll just create one, and all I need to do is take this object here, the cylinder, and put it into the volume builder, right? So this is this object, and it has a list of like what it's going to do down in here. You could also, if you want to, just to clean it up, I'll just put it in there, just parent it that way. But it has to be down here in this little list. And what it does is, of course, at this point you're like, well, this looks really crappy. And what it's done is recreate this as a voxelized object, and it has the resolution here is basically distance, right? Because these are three-dimensional pixels, if you want to think of it that way. If I make this 5 centimeters, you can see it gets a little tighter. If I make this 1 centimeter, it starts to look like a clean object, right? But if I were to render this or output it, for a prototyper, it's still not an object the way like you were modeling, right? Something that has edges and points and polygons. This is kind of a weird ghost object, this voxelized object. So the next thing that we need to use with this, and I'm going to turn this back to 10 is the default. So instead of just the builder, what I want is the mesher. So this is the thing that says, okay, I'm going to take this cylinder and I pass its information onto the builder, and then I'm going to take whatever the builder has created and I'm going to put that into the mesher, right? So if I use a little hotkey here, this is actually the wireframe, right? And you had sent me, you could see the wireframe on your coffee mug, right? So this is the mesh that doesn't exactly look really good. And of course, from a subdivision surface, this looks really crappy, but this won't matter here in a minute. And we're just going to kind of bypass that paradigm. So I'll leave the wireframe visible here. And you can see with the default, this is the kind of resolution we get. Let's go all the way down to Rick. This is pretty close to like your final resolution. In fact, I'll do something not quite. 1 centimeter would be a ton of resolution. Here, you can see the edges things got tighter, right, in the space. There are a lot more polygons. If I turn the wireframe off, you can see it also is kind of faceted here on the sides, right? So it has this here. And the reason is because the object that we put in here, the cylinder, has so many segments, right? So it has 16, which is make it 4, right? You can see I can make a cube a cylinder with 4 sides. It's basically a cube. So the default with this was 16, and so I still had these chunky little sections. I'm just going to go all the way up here. I'm going to have 120 sections. So this has a lot of resolution, but we're going to create a lot of resolution anyways by using the builder. So we might as well tell it, hey, we want a smooth surface here across that. And I already have a cylinder. So at this point, you're like, Dane's been drinking the scotch in the middle of the day or something, because it doesn't look any better than what the cylinder was before. The whole deal here is we don't want to necessarily just build one object using the builder. We want to use the builder so that we can use Boolean operations, so that we can union or intersect or subtract or add or whatever, these kind of pieces together. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate the cylinder that I had here before. And let's name this. I'm going to name this out sil, and this is an inner cylinder. All right, so this is, they're just in there. If I go to the builder, because I parented them this way, they're inside. And right now it says union. I'm going to change this actually to subtract. And because these are exactly the same size as each other, it cut them away, right? So there's no object whatsoever. But if I make the inner one a little smaller, right, you can see I now have this mug like shape in here. It's kind of nice. It still has these edges that are a little funky, right, just because of the resolution. I could change this a little bit lower. The other thing I'm going to do as I work through here is I'm just going to put the last kind of component, one of these new things that you haven't seen before, is we have the builder, we have the mesher, and then inside that we have a smoothing function. So there's various ways that you can change these settings. You can just leave it probably at the default. I like to shorten the distance of the smooth, but add a few more iterations to it. But it basically will do exactly what we want. And if I were to make this, the more resolution I put in there, the tighter these edges will get. For now, I'm just going to leave that at 2. Right? All right, so I've recreated that mug, basically, without having to go to the polygon level. I just said, here's one object, and let's subtract another object that's a little bit smaller. And of course, our mug needs a handle. So let's go ahead and go to the torus. And of course, with the torus, with any of the primitives, there's some underneath its object tabs. There's various size settings. There's also orientation. So I'm just going to make this move along the Z. And interactively just scale this up and down and move it over until we get some kind of handle size that looks about right. We'll call that good, I guess. Maybe it could be a little thicker as a handle. I don't know. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is put that into the builder, right? And so you can see that it has been added. You can see that it has it's a little chunky here, right? Again, because this object here is, let's make this 4, right? You can see that would have 4 segments around it. And of course, let's do 8, right? So we could make this a very weird shaped thing. But again, I'm going to make this about 120 around, and let's do like 64. What's the right number? Just enough until you get it smooth. I've done this enough that I'm making approximate guesses that I know will work reasonably well for me, right? And there's so many different ways that I could try to treat this. But at this point, if I will go back to the builder. Oh, and then the other thing is I want to put the torus below that so it kind of smooths itself out. And because of that, you can see the smoothing that's gone along here, which I kind of like. That's what I was looking for. You can see now this is not good, right? So this is the last part I wanted to show. The order that you do things is important, right? So the outer cylinders first, and then we're going to cut into that. And this is where, kind of an intro level for a student, this would be really helpful as they're starting to get used to moving objects around and getting used to 3D space without having to work with all the cutting and everything. We could just take this, the torus, and let's just change the order, right? So I'll turn this part off, right? So I'll take a cylinder, I'll glue this on top of it, and then once I have those, together, then I'll take that cylinder and cut away from the resulting object, which not only cuts away from the cylinder, but also the torus that's on the outside, right? So I get this mug shape, right? And I didn't have to go to the point of like adding extra edges in these various places, right, to get this to look the way that I wanted to. So I think I'll just leave it at that. Hopefully this recording's going to work. I'm doing it with QuickTime instead of my normal software that I have on the home machine. But I will create another tutorial to talk about how to make even more complex things in these processes, where we could add different cuts or different changes to this, or subtract other objects. So instead of having to get in teach students all the edges and cutting and extruding and all that stuff, we can just use objects to cut them away and create pieces that we want. Though it would be really helpful, take a shape like the torus, if you could model that to change its shape, but still just use it within this kind of volume builder. It would be maybe the best of both worlds, especially for an intro modeler. So, all right, hopefully this helps.